Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first virtual meeting of the CloudStack European User Group. It's great to see so many of our normal attendees here today. We've had over 210, sorry, actually exactly 210 registrations for this, and I can still see people are joining now, so hopefully we'll get up to that number. So welcome everybody, let's get on. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Giles Sirett. I'm a PMC member and committer in CloudStack. I also chair the CloudStack European User Group. In my day job, I run a company called Shape Blue. The aims of this group, I mean, the European User Group's been together for nearly 8 years now, I think. And the idea is to create a collaborative environment for anything related to Apache CloudStack. As its name suggests, it's European focused, although the fact we are virtual today means we've got people who have come in from much further afield for this particular session. We meet quarterly. We used to meet quarterly in places like London and Berlin and Prague. This is the first time we've done a virtual group since a virtual meetup since the pandemic began. Idea is people come along, give talks, share ideas, talk about tech that's relative to Apache CloudStack. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's related to CloudStack. So what we've tried to do with this event today is sort of recreate that. And, you know, the sad bit is we're not all in a room chatting. We're going to try and sort that out later. But what we've got is some great speakers, some great talks, and then we've even got a chance for us all to have a chat later. We've got a virtual pub. I'll tell you about that in a second. So today's agenda, take note, this is in Central European summertime. I'm going to do my usual introduction. I'm also going to do a quick talk about what's new in CloudStack 4.15. After me at 1350 CEST, Abhishek's talking about customizing the new CloudStack UI, because the mechanisms you use to actually customize the UI have changed considerably from the old CloudStack UI. At 14:30 CEST, Gabriel's doing a talk about some work he's proposing around some changes to the way CloudStack and KVM handle high availability, and some really interesting stuff he's got to discuss there. At 15:10, Raphael is going to join us. Raphael's talking about from metal to service, 100% automation with CloudStack and Ansible. At 15:50, Simon and Rado will be joining us to talk about the work they've been doing on integration with Tungsten, the SDN platform. And I think that's all of them. And then at 1700 CEST, we're going to get into another room, hopefully, and have some virtual beers and chats together. Now, if you just notice the times, what we've done is kept the talks down to 30 minutes and put 10 minutes between each talk. Very conscious. We're all, you know, working differently these days. The idea of us, of everybody on this call being able to sort of focus for 5 hours. So we've built in plenty of time for people to go off and answer their emails and get a drink or whatever they need to do. So what I suggest, if you are in Central European time, just take a picture of that screen I've got shared at the moment, because it doesn't matter if you drift away, you get caught into a work discussion or on your work Slack channel or something. The important thing is to be back for when the next talk starts, if you're interested in it. So I'll leave that for a second. Those of you in Europe, those of you, including myself, in the UK or Ireland, there's the same agenda with obviously just 1 hour difference. So I'll leave that for a second. Those of you in the UK and Ireland, take a photo of that. Okay, those of you in India, so quite a few people from India have registered for this. There's one for you. So you've got the timings for the start of each event. That's all I've done at the moment. Obviously, apologies if you're in another time zone, and I know we have got people from other time zones, but this was going to go on and on if I did it too long. But the important thing is, whatever time the previous talk finishes, the next one will always be starting at the time you see the published start time there. And all of these will be recorded and published somewhere or another. Okay, so at the end, we're trying to do a virtual pub, because one of the great things about when we meet up physically is we always go to a local bar, and that's really a lot of the value of these user groups, is where we, chat through ideas, put the worlds to rights, discuss info, whatever it is we're talking about. So we've got another room. I'll share this again after the last speaker's finished. We've got another room where everybody's going to be unmuted. Everybody can switch their video on, bring a beer along, have a chat with colleagues and friends. I don't know how that's going to go. I've certainly done enough Zooms with my family over the last year to know they can be a bit of a pain, but let's just give it a go, see how we get on. Okay, in terms of questions, the chat is open. It would be great today if we can all get a bit of chat going on between ourselves. There's now 109 people in this call at the moment. So please, guys, get on the chat, have some chats with each other during the various talks. And if you want to ask questions on that chat, please do so. There is also the Zoom Q&A button. What I ask is, if you've got a specific question that you want the presenter to address at the end of their talk, put it in the Zoom Q&A thing, so we as presenters can see those and work through that list at the end. Here's the next exciting thing. Because we've got some brilliant sponsors, which we're all thanking in a second for this event, and because it's virtual, which means we haven't got a bar to go to, we've got no food to work on. What we've done is spend some money on providing some gift cards. We've got 5 Amazon gift cards worth €500 each, which is a significant prize in my opinion. And to win one of those, here's what you need to do. So you can probably work out the probability. We've got over 100, so you stand about a 1 in 20 chance. So what I need everybody to do is tweet something about this event, obviously on Twitter. Include the hashtag you can see in the top right-hand corner. Mention CloudStack. Say something great about the event, or be critical of the event if you want. And Yvette is going to decide who wins. The 5 best tweets win. Yvette has stressed it's not Eurovision, so there's no formal voting process for this. She is going to choose the 5 best tweets, but she's also going to be in the virtual pub later. So if you think you should have won and you haven't, then you'll be able to question Yvette in the pub later after she's had a beer or two. So please send some tweets about the event, talk about the speakers, talk about the sponsors, get the word out to others who haven't managed to attend that we're doing this today. And on that note, thank you to all of the organisations who have kindly sponsored this. Dimsy, those of you who don't know, are a really cool service provider based in Paris. PC Extreme, ditto, very cool service provider based in the Netherlands, who both run IaaS platforms based on Apache CloudStack. ShapeBlue is my company. Limbit and Storepool, 2-block storage providers who have both got some integration into Apache CloudStack and very keen to see these events happening and to support our community. So again, mainly for those of you who haven't been to one of these before, the CloudStack European User Group is one of many CloudStack sort of meetup groups and user groups dotted around the world. There's nothing formal about these groups. They're not a formal Apache thing. They're just groups that have coalesced over the years. I started this one with a bunch of organizations in and around the UK initially who were running CloudStack. It became the European user group, but there are meetup groups and CloudStack groups popping up all over the place. Now, those pictures obviously are at least a year old because none of these groups have actually been meeting physically in the last year. We hope to see more of them popping up at some virtual events, and hopefully all of us can get back to meeting in person. I'm thinking realistically that's going to be next year now. Also in the CloudStack community, we have, or again, used to have, an annual CloudStack collaboration conference. The last one we managed to have was in the autumn of 2019, which was over in Las Vegas. Obviously, last year's didn't happen. There is discussion at the moment for one this year, which will obviously be a virtual event. I think there's some discussion on the marketing mailing list about this. Thinking about something in Q3 2021. It's obviously going to be an online event, and the format's being discussed. Now later, I think Yvette is going to give everybody a survey about how today has gone. Now this is not a collaboration conference. This is a European user group, but really good if we can get some feedback about how this has worked, because we might be able to think about using this as a template for how we do the collaboration conference in the autumn. And for those of you who haven't been, that's much bigger than this. We normally have sort of 40 odd talks. We have a hackathon, we have breakouts, we have all sorts of stuff like that. So those of you not involved in the marketing mailing list, it'd be great if you could get involved and share your ideas as well in terms of how we could actually put that together. And then, just as I was saying there, just a sort of refresher about the structure, you know, the CloudStack development community, of which I'm a member, and I know lots of you are members, is governed by the Apache Software Foundation. They provide the governance model for us as a community. And then all of the various user groups I mentioned earlier, including this one, are sort of informal things that sit around the edge of that community. Actually, as is the collaboration conference itself. Most of the people who organize the collaboration conference also come from the dev community, but it's not an official thing that Apache is organizing. Okay, so what we normally do is some CloudStack news since we last met, and as we normally meet quarterly, there's normally only 3 months of news. We haven't met for over a year. I think the last time this group met was in Berlin, which I think was just before we all got locked down. It was end of February or mid-February 2020. So we've got a lot of news. So I'm just going to pick a few things and do this at a sort of summary level. From the release perspective, we've had 2 releases since we last met. 4.14 was released just about a year ago. 4.15, which is effectively our current long-term support version, was released at the end of January. I'm going to talk specifically about the 4.15 features in a second. There's a new LTS dot version of that, which is literally, I think the release candidate's due to be cut this week, next week, so that should be out in a few weeks' time. And then also a lot of work in the community going on at the moment towards 4.16. 4.16 scheduled Q3, Q4. It will be again when all of the functionalities in and the community coalesce about getting the release out. Realistically, my guess is about November time for 4.16. In terms of community activity, I was a little bit worried when the whole pandemic started that we would sort of struggle a bit on the open source side, because you know a lot of people were running around doing a lot of extra stuff in their day jobs, and actually as we were trying to get 4.14 out of the door, there was quite a bit of delay there, and I sort of initially thought, is this because we've got a pandemic and people aren't as focused as they once were on working in the community? But actually, if you look at some analysis, this is just a metric based on, you know, the number of mailing list messages we're having, which we see no overall downward trend there. We see the usual cycles of those going up around release time, just before, just after release. And actually the overall average there, this is only till February of this year, so it's not right up to date. The overall average is about in the right place. And tying into that, the number of Git commits we've got a month. These are, except these are very crude metrics around our activity. But again, you see the cycles around releases. You see the build up there to a lot of stuff getting ready into 4.15. Earlier in the year, the stuff going into 4.14. And actually, if you put, I don't know, a moving average or some sort of line on that, you see a slight upward trend in the amount of commits that are going into CloudStack, which is a good thing. I think, however, because people have been, you know, focusing on a lot of different things in the last year, I think sometimes that's slowed down the cadence a little bit. Things are taking a little bit longer to test and review, but we're still seeing the activity in CloudStack, which is great. In other news, some really good stuff, actually. We've got this year, we've got 4 students who have joined the community. I don't know if any of you guys are on this session today. Bikram, Sangwoo, Aprav and Jungsan, sorry, I'm probably mispronounced that, have come into CloudStack through the Google Summer of Code program. For those of you who don't know, Google provide effectively a pot of money every year and a structure to encourage students in their final year at university to come in and work on open source projects. And as a project, we have to sort of bid for those students and attract them into our project with all of the other open source projects. we put 4 proposals out and all 4 were accepted, which is fantastic. And these guys will work with mentors in our community to develop relatively small but discrete pieces of functionality. So it gives them exposure to the open source world, to the CloudStack specifically, and we get some functionality built, which is a win-win-win. In other news, we have a new VP of CloudStack. This change happened in March. So previously Sven was our VP. Massive thanks to all the work you did there, Sven. Gabriel is now our new VP. You'll all get to meet Gabriel later because he's doing not the next talk, the talk after that about KVM high availability. There's been some work going on around inclusivity, and this is something a lot of open source projects and also software vendors are doing at the moment. In 2021, there's a set of words and terminology that some people find offensive or are sensitive to. So this general move about removing some of these terms from code base, from documentation and what have you. And I think the PR for this, the commit for this went in some time ago. So you should see these changes start to filter through in 4.16. Another interesting thing we've been discussing in the community is a provider from HashiCorp Terraform, which I know a lot of people use, and HashiCorp haven't actually been maintaining this. They haven't put a lot of focus. So we're having a debate in the community, or had a debate in the community, about actually bringing this provider into the CloudStack project itself, and we as a community will maintain that provider. That's required some legal wranglings with licensing and the Apache Software Foundation, what have you, but I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel. And this is something I think may well happen with some of the other integrations we see, that, you know, as a community, we rely on a lot of these integrations for our users, that we may well say as a community, hey guys, we'll just maintain these. So that may well happen for some of the other integrations we've got. And something which caught my eye, exciting to see. We've got 2 storage vendors, Linstore, who have kindly sponsored today, and I think are on this call, and Dell PowerFlex. We've now got integration in master for both of those storage platforms, and it's really good to see vendor integrations popping up, particularly around things like storage, which is just, you know, giving people more choice on what they can use in terms of managed storage, and just instead of just the dumb way of doing it just with NFS. And it's really good to see vendors coming in and wanting to contribute stuff into CloudStack. So that's my sort of intro finished. I'm going to sort of segue into talking about what's new in CloudStack 4.15. And as I said earlier, I mean, this isn't brand new. It was released 19th of January, as it says there. But it's quite a big, 4.15 is quite a big release. There's a lot of new functionality, some major new features, and some major changes to the way that some things work. Headlines are 13 new major features, 59 enhancements, a load of bug fixes, and it is an LTS release, so it will be supported under the LTS framework until 2 years from its release date, which is going to be February 2023. So let's just drill in and look at some of the new features of CloudStack 4.15. First of all, the new user interface. Now, I guess everybody here now has seen the new CloudStack user interface. We did a tech preview of it in the previous version, which is 4.14. But importantly, in 4.15, it's at general availability. So it is the interface for Apache CloudStack. 4.15 still ships with the old user interface, but that is no longer maintained. So all of the new 4.15 functionality from a UI perspective has only gone into the new user interface. Why this is important and why I'm still talking about this, 4 or 5 months later, the next version of CloudStack, which will be 4.16, will not ship with the old user interface. So the code will be stripped. That means any of you who are presenting the UI to users or to customers, if you're running public cloud, That interface is going to have to change once you deploy 4.15, 4.16. So if you've got documentation, you've got, you know, user videos, all of that sort of stuff, you need to be thinking about this now. The UI was developed under the codename Project Primate. That's effectively being dropped now, which everybody's just talking about the UI. And personally, I don't know about other people, but I'm really enjoying the new UI experience. It's so much better than our old user interface. 4.15 also brought some support for some new operating system versions. So we now support CentOS 8, both as a hypervisor host or to run the management server on. There are also discussions, broader discussions going on around CentOS and what's happened with that project. There's talk about Rocky Linux adding support for other Linux platforms, because we've obviously seen that CentOS is not going to be the open source project it once was. We also now support Ubuntu 20.4, again, both for management server and hypervisor hosts, and XCP NG 8.1. Those of you who haven't seen XCP NG, it's a fork of Zen server, worth looking at. They're doing some really cool stuff. So one of the big new features with 4.15 is a set of tooling for managing secondary storage. Now, you know, secondary storage isn't the glamorous end of CloudStack, and it really hasn't had a lot of attention over the years. You know, a lot of focus goes into how we deal and manage primary storage, but what about these ever increasing secondary storage pools? And I think it was decided it was time to sort of invest a little bit of time in allowing people to manage those pools over time, instead of having to hack databases and that sort of thing. So there's new functionality in 4.15. There's a tool which specifically lets you balance data among secondary data stores. You can also use that tool to migrate data between stores, to set a store as read-only, so it can have nothing added to it. The allocation algorithm has been updated to provide more balance, because it was just random before. So it assumed with random that your stores were going to fill up equally. But of course, if you had a store that was at 90%, you had one that was at 10%, it would still allocate things randomly to those. So there's a new API command, migrate secondary storage. You set the source pool to what you're migrating from. You set the destination pools, and notice that's a plural. There's a screenshot there of what it looks like in the new UI. And then you choose the type of migration. So you can do a complete migration, which is basically move every artifact in storage pool A into storage pool B. And that you would use if you want to get rid of a storage pool because you're decommissioning the storage or something like that. Or you could move it from A into B and C to spread the artifacts across 2 or 3 or however many pools you want. There's also the option to specify a balance migration. And this is, I suppose, migration is probably a incorrect term if you do this. What this will do is evenly distribute the artifacts from storage pool A into whatever the destination's storage pools are. So you could distribute balance between A and then into B and C. So it will take everything from A and balance it across B and C. Or you could take it from A, balance it across A, B, and C, and that would have the result of balancing those 3 pools to evenly distribute the storage space used in those 3 pools. There's a global setting for that image store imbalance threshold, and that sets the standard deviation of the image, so how tight it should get, how balanced they should be. And importantly, from viewpoint of snapshots, linked snapshots are kept together, so it won't migrate half the snapshot chain and leave the other half on another pool. There's some controls, because obviously this is quite a big resource intensive background task, so there's some performance and scalability controls in terms of the number of sessions that can run doing that work at the same time, amount of wait time and timeouts, etc., etc. We can also now set a storage pool to read only, again available on the API or in the UI. So again, that could be used if the storage pool's full or you're looking over time to maybe shut it down. Mark it read only, so nothing new will be added to it. The next new feature is called Advanced vSphere, or vSphere Advanced Capabilities. And really this has come about, you know, there's always this thing with CloudStack. CloudStack has to support a consistent set of functionality across all of the hypervisors it supports. A lot of work, as more people are focused on KVM, a lot of work has gone in focused on KVM over the last few years. And to a certain extent, VMware have been sort of neglected. We had our VMware integration, we could orchestrate VMware, but VMware vSphere in the meantime had developed and it got a lot of new functionality. So this is really a lot of this is a sort of catch up to be able to exploit a lot of those new things that VMware now offer. And I hope very much going forward that with CloudStack we can keep that more timely. We can stay in pace with what the different hypervisors are actually offering. So what this actually offers is support for a whole range of new types of data store, vSAN, VMFS6, vVols, data store clusters, all of those things that have been available in vSphere for some time, you can now exploit those in CloudStack. We can also use vSphere storage policies and link those into our service offerings in CloudStack. And we can now also allow inter-cluster VM and volume migrations. Now, that's not a massive list of new things in VMware, but what's important is the work that's gone on from a refactoring viewpoint to actually make that happen. And when the CloudStack VMware integration was developed initially, things were done basically in a native way by CloudStack. What's now happened is things have been refactored to use the native APIs of vSphere, which have developed themselves. So all of these operations, CloudStack isn't doing them itself now, it's asking the hypervisor to do them for things like creating a volume, attaching volume, etc., etc. And of course, what that means is going forward, as VMware develop richer and richer stuff at the hypervisor layer, it will be much easier for us to expose those through CloudStack. So yeah, we've got the new data store types. To use one of those, you still use the pre-setup, and then CloudStack will basically just not even know about what data store type that VMware is actually using behind the scenes. Storage policy supports, so they map into disk offering, service offering, etc. And there's a couple of new APIs there which allow CloudStack to go and fetch the storage policies from VMware and bring those back into CloudStack. And we've now got inter-cluster VM and volume migrations in VMware as well. So this functionality, full OVF support, is also VMware only. And what this is about is being driven by a quite different thing. This is about organizations that predominantly want to run virtual appliances in CloudStack, like a Cisco ASA appliance or a Riverbed appliance, which usually gets shipped on an OVF with an OVA descriptor. And what this functionality is about CloudStack being able to read the properties in terms of what that requires in terms of disks, what that requires in terms of NICs and the order of those NICs, what it requires in terms of compute and storage, etc., etc. CloudStack being able to read all of those from the OVF and the OVA and almost mandate those when somebody creates a VM based on that template, rather than potentially, rather than a user having to be told, look, you need to create your NICs this way, you need to create them in this order, you need to have so many vCPUs, etc. All of that can now be mandated, and CloudStack will read that from the OVA. So what we can now do, when we register a template in CloudStack, there's an option called deploy as is. And deploy as is, rather than letting or asking you to set the hypervisor type, the format, and all of the various features at the point of creating the template, it will read it from the OVA and then deploy VMs based on whatever it read at the time of creating the template. In 4.15, that actually isn't an option. So if you choose a format OVA, it will automatically create it as a deploy as is. In 4.15, there is an enhancement where it's now optional. You can toggle that on and off on a per template basis. All of the properties that have been set for that image are all stored in a table in the CloudStack database deploy template as is details, and that's stored as JSON. I'm not going to go into the details of all of that JSON, but that's basically storing all of the properties that have been set against the OVF in CloudStack. So when it deploys a VM based on that template, it will automatically go and choose all those things, so the user doesn't have to choose them. So from a user perspective, they see some changes in the deploy VM wizard. I think this example here is just showing, the compute configuration. So we've got here some sort of appliance that needs 1 vCPU and 2 gig of memory. So that's actually been set and stored in the JSON for the deploy as is. The example there is the network, the NICs, and also the order of those NICs, which is obviously sometimes important for network appliances. All of those are defined in the OVF. They're read into CloudStack when the template is uploaded to CloudStack, and they are all then preset when somebody tries to deploy a VM based on that template. It also will read the VApp custom properties. There isn't support there for proper multi-VM VApps. It's just single machine VApps. But the reason that support was added is things like the administrator password for a network appliance. That can be read, and then the user will be prompted for that when deploying the VM. Also, the EULA, the license agreement for whoever it is, Cisco, Riverbed, whoever, that also can be read as a property. It was stored in the database and then be presented as a user so they can accept it. Okay, so what that's done is basically enable easily, without having to do a lot of work on the pre-work on those templates and give users loads of documentation. It's allowed organizations to get appliances, add the template, CloudStack will then read all those properties and then ask the appropriate things or complete the appropriate things during the deploy VM process. So I find that super exciting functionality. There's been some enhancements to dynamic roles, the RBAC model. You can now import and export to move those roles between environments, between zones you might even want to do. You can create a new role from an existing role, and there's a set of new default roles for sort of common security use cases. Okay, we can also now use dynamic roles at the project level. We couldn't do that before, which is pretty interesting. We have got support for Redfish. So this is used in out-of-band management and also the KVM host HA, which also in turn uses out-of-band management. CloudStack's got the ability traditionally to speak via IPMI to the actual servers, determine whether they're switched on, switched off, what state they're in, etc. IPMI is effectively a dying protocol. A lot of people are moving away from it, and Redfish has emerged as as effectively the sort of go-to effectively in that space. So CloudStack will now work with IPMI or Redfish for its out-of-band stuff, and that was possible because when the initial out-of-band work was done a number of years ago, a driver model was developed because it was always anticipated this may happen. So actually what's happened now is we've got a new driver has been created by some of the guys who are talking today, actually. I think, Gabrielle, you worked on this. A new driver has been provided which lets CloudStack, through its driver model, speak to Redfish instead of IPMI. Okay, we can now boot into hardware setup, which is it's a pretty rare use case, but sometimes you want to create a VM and you want to go into its hard setup to play around with its disks or what have you. And I'm sure you've all tried this before. It was always traditionally with CloudStack, press launch VM, and then quickly get on the console as quickly as you could before it went through its boot sequence to press F8 or whatever it is these days, which is always a bit of a race. Now you can specify on the deploy VM wizard to boot into hardware setup, and it will stop there at the hardware setup screen, so there's no need to sort of rush and get into that race. There's been some enhancements to CloudStack's logs, and there is other work going on, I know, in this at the moment. But at long last, these ridiculous long byte values we had for storage space and for all sorts of different things have now been converted into gig, into meg, into whatever is appropriate, which I'm finding really useful. Just makes the logs infinitely more readable. I can now configure the root disk via the service offering. So, you know, traditionally, when a user has deployed a VM, they get the choice to say how big they want the root disk to be. But you can now, via the service offering, effectively hard code that so they don't get the choice, because the logic here is they're deploying a particular Linux distribution, they're deploying a Windows VM. You know how big the root disk should be from day one. So rather than giving the user choice, you can force that on them at the service provider level. And finally, probably the most important thing for me is we have a new console. The console now, well, the existing console was based on its homegrown technology via our own API. It was sluggish, it was slow. We had this problem with tiling all the time. Keyboard support was always a pain. So console access now is via the NoVNC library, which has been integrated into CloudStack. It's a completely different experience. It's a much nicer experience from a performance perspective. You know, things that you would expect in terms of keyboard access. It will support anything that the VM will support. You can paste into the console. You've got full screen mode. All these things were impossible before. So it's greatly improved the user experience when using the console.